Arena Crafties, we are back for installment 5 in our Zendikar Rising complete spoiler review. Enjoy. Cragplate Baloth. 5 green. Creature beast at rare, 6/6. Kicker 2 and a green. The spell can't be countered. Hexproof, haste. If it was kicked, it ETBs with 4+1/+1 counters on it. So one of the main reasons I'm interested in this card is that it reminds me of Carnage Tyrant, and that card saw a surprising amount of play in the format that it was in. There are some ways in which this is worse, and namely it costs 1 more, which is definitely worse. It has haste, which is better than Carnage Tyrant. It doesn't have trample, so that makes it worse. And it has 6 power instead of 7 power, which makes it worse. But haste is frickin' a strong ability, man. And the edge case where this thing ends up being 10 power is pretty scary. Granted, that's going to cost 10 mana. So here are my questions with this card. A of all, have we moved standards so far to the point where Carnage Tyrant would be unplayable? So that's my first question. And B of all, is this going to matter? Just in this particular format, is a card like this going to matter?
Somebody's ears are going to be burning, and hopefully they will send some feedback to the show or leave a salty review, because we just need that engagement. But hey, I might make you mad with this one.
Yeah.
Carnage Tyrant wasn't that playable.
Okay, I mean, that's just like your opinion, man.
Whoa, okay. I see that. You forgot to vet me. We didn't go back and talk about Carnage Tyrant before you invited me to be your co-host. No, Carnage Tyrant had its moments, but it was not like, it wasn't very key in many matchups or strategies. By the end of the format, it was a little bit of a sideboard here and there at the most.
I would agree that it wasn't just like a insta-slam index. It did come out of the sideboard in multiple matchups. I do remember it seeing a fair amount of play, and I remember it seeing a fair amount of tournament play. So I think that you have to acknowledge that card was a player and something that you had to respect in the format.
Nah.
All right, that's fair. You can just disregard.
Head in sand.
You can just disregard the green dinosaur. Hey, I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
It would probably be a fun show to go back and be like, how many Carnage Tyrants in this top 8? But anyway, I guess this is probably just going to shape our opinions on the card. You probably don't want my help evaluating this anymore if I dare respect the mighty Tyrant.
I figured that you'd be down on this card, and to be clear, I'm not super up on it, but it looked enough like a card that I remember being played, especially out of the board, that I thought it was worth talking about.
The thing that I always remember with big green monsters is that the bigger it is, the more important trample becomes.
Yeah, the loss of trample
this ain't
sucks.
It really does.
Yeah, it really sucks. So, are you basically not worried about this when you're playing a control deck then? Do you think that the control deck will have answers for this?
I'm never going to have in my mind, what do I do about Cragplate Baloth? Because I can always make a 1/1 with my castle, block it, untap, then shatter the sky.
Castle embarrassing this card is pretty bad.
Yeah, I don't have fear. Also, 7 mana is like that. It's kind of that threshold on the lands, right? Because that's what the land sorcery spell is for the most part. So I might have 2 angels when you play this, or I might have just drawn a bunch of extra cards. So maybe I'm tapped out and you get to hit me. It's interesting, and its format, it's contextual. Carnage Tyrant also was contextual. I think Carnage Tyrant was better. I think that adding a mana to Carnage Tyrant would have pushed it almost completely off the map.
I agree.
And this isn't strictly better if it were 6. It would be close. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's not it.
Mm-hmm. I think the question is, which do you value more, trample or haste? And I would agree that specifically given the fact that Castle Ardenvale is in the format, I think that moves us towards the trample being better, or some other form of evasion. If this had the can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less clause on it, I think it would be a lot better. And Frankly, I don't know why it didn't have that on it, because I still don't think it would have been like a format smasher if it did.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but green card without enough text.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, I think Elder Gargaroth is probably just going to be strictly better than this card. And that card doesn't even see main deck play in a lot of decks. Let's talk about, read it for us, Inscription of Ruin.
Inscription of Ruin is 2 and a black sorcery at rare with kicker 2 black. Choose 1. If this spell was kicked, choose any number instead. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Or return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. Okay, reading discussion. I think I'm going to start saying like dot because it's like choose 1 or choose any number if it was kicked. So I'm having trouble like deciding how to separate them.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say dot.
Sounds good.
So in a nutshell, you get a Mind Rot, or you get a Call the Death Dweller that only hits one thing, or without the abilities, or you get a Destroy Target Creature, converted mana 3 or less, but at 7 mana, you tie it all into a bow. What do you think?
Okay, I'm not feeling this card. Here's why. First of all, it's sorcery speed, which kind of sucks. That makes it worse than the green modal one in a number of ways. Like, what deck is going to get value out of all 3 of the modes? So I'm just thinking about a deck that runs small creatures is probably not angling to get to 7 mana and really get paid on this. And even when you do get the payoff, it's just not that big of a payoff. We're really below rate on the removal spell. Mind Rot is fine, so you can just cast this as a Mind Rot if you want to, but Mind Rot is not standard playable. So it's just hard for me to imagine any scenario in which I'm excited to cast this spell.
Yeah, that's the thing with the price, right? Every single thing about it is priced probably 1 more than it should be for playability.
Yeah.
Which means that if you're ever playing it for 3, you're falling behind, and you have to get to 7 and play it for 7 and have all the modes matter, or at least 2 of them, to feel good about that, which seems unlikely. And I think that makes sense, and that's where I fall on it too. I'm not excited about playing this card, and yeah, not into it. I did just realize, why is green instant? Blue is not instant. This is not instant.
Yeah,
obviously this one kind of can't be an instant because of the Mind Rot ability, right?
Yeah, probably.
People really don't like that, but
one of the things I don't like about it is that none of these modes are relevant at 7 mana. That's what I don't like about it. At the point in the game where you're spending 7 mana, the Mind Rot might just not be relevant anyway. Your opponent's had a chance to play the cards that matter. A CMC cost 2 or less creature doesn't matter on turn 8 or whatever. And likewise, destroying a small creature on that turn likely doesn't matter. So that's kind of what I don't like about this. I mean, in addition to all the other things I don't like about it, it just seems really irrelevant specifically at 7 mana.
I completely agree with you.
Okay, so this was a card, I misread this card originally, and it's worse than I thought it was. I thought this card was an instant, and I thought it was busted. But instead, it is a sorcery. Royal Eruption, 1 and a red, sorcery, kicker 5. It deals 3 damage to any target. If it was kicked, it deals 5 damage instead. Is this card going to get played in Standard?
Yes. Just about every time that we haven't had Lightning Strike but have had a Volcanic Hammer, a sorcery speed version of Lightning Strike, it gets played.
Okay.
I think universally every time.
I just think it's a lot worse than Lightning Strike.
It is. It's Volcanic Hammer with upside, but it still gets played. Red Mage mentality, man. Stop trying to be impressed with the cards.
Yeah. Just play the cards
the place,
you got.
Man.
This is the removal spell we have. I mean, would it be so... This is the thing, right? Would Lightning Strike be so overpowered if it had this kicker ability? I don't think it would.
I agree.
It would be an upgrade, and it would be a relevant upgrade, but I don't think it would make it too powerful for Standard.
I think the kicker is just a smokescreen, dude.
Yeah.
It'll get you, and it'll feel bad someday.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it doesn't matter, and I still think this card would get played.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. So this was the card that was making me feel really skeptical to play the Vampire Nighthawk, because all of your red decks are just going to be able to knock that one out of the sky. It's going to feel pretty bad.
Yeah, if this card is seeing widespread play, that card suffers.
Yeah. That's the biggest card that loses from Royal Eruption, in my opinion. Especially since it doesn't have haste, or it's not a Brazen Borrower. So when your opponent eruptions your Brazen Borrower, you're going to feel like you got ahead in that exchange. Whereas if this takes out like a relevant 3-drop, then you're going to be pretty far behind.
But hey, it's another type for the graveyard to make your next one bigger. They usually don't play sorceries.
There you go, baby. It's all upside. Read for us Thieving Skydiver.
1 and a blue, 2/1 Merfolk Rogue, kicker X, where X can't be 0, flying. When Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver.
Got him.
Also bonus points, excite the nerds.
For any particular reason?
Oh, yeah, Colossal Hammer.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. Colossal Hammer. Dude, never has Colossal Hammer been more popular than with the spoiler for this set.
And it rotated. It
It rotated.
It's so brutal. And I have to keep reminding people, and they refuse. Like the meme on my frickin' Twitch streams for a week now has been this card with Colossal Hammer, though.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Maybe historic, right? Maybe historic. Gonna be a fun jank deck. In the meantime, this card is weird. My guess is you don't play it unless, I don't know, some kind of artifact or equipment-y deck ends up being a big part of the format. X can't be 0 is interesting to me. So if I'm reading this right, the floor on this card is actually just a 3-mana 2/1 flyer that does nothing. Is that right?
Well, you can play it without the kicker, right? You don't have to pay the kicker. You can have a 2/1 flyer.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you can't steal a 0-cost artifact without paying any mana?
Yes, you have to pay at least 1 for the effect. So if you want to steal a Stonecoil Serpent, you have to pay 1.
That's pretty deep. That's gas. Stealing your opponent's Stonecoil is gas.
Not bad.
I don't know, though. I mean, this just seems so situational to me. Like, do you even take sideboard slots to play it?
It depends on the positioning of artifacts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as somebody said, you can steal Lucky Clover, I'm like, good job on turn 4.
Yeah.
They'll Brazen Borrow it back.
Yeah, it's not going to be good
It's
enough.
Not good.
Yeah, this card seems very, very situational to me. It's possible that just having a 2/1 flying rogue is already upside in your deck, and so that makes this card more playable, but it's still not enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not close to enough with the rogues that got spoiled in this set, in my opinion.
Yeah, there are other competition, right? So, yeah, I don't even know if this sees sideboard play, but if there's some artifact that is bossing the format, which is cheap enough, which demands an answer, that's a lot of ifs, but if all of those things are true, then maybe.
Basically a good Ozolith deck.
Yeah, a good Ozolith deck is a good example. That's the thing, it has to be cheap. By the time you steal Embercleave with this, you're dead, all right? Get that out of your mind. All right, get that out of your mind. Your opponent cast Embercleave for 2, but you have to pay 6 to steal it. So, there you go. Kargan Intimidator. 1 on a red, human warrior at rare. It is a 3/1. The first line of text gets my attention already. Cowards can't block warriors. Boom.
I thought that were like a fact of life. I didn't know it had to be text.
Yeah, it didn't need to be named, right? There you go. Static ability, and it's a doozy. Pay 1 mana as many times as you like. Choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Kargan Intimidator gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That's 1 dot. Second dot. Target creature becomes a coward until end of turn. Third dot. Target warrior gains trample until end of turn. I mean, card's got a lot of text. The more I read this card, the less I like it. Are you into it?
With you. The more I read it, the less I like it. It's kind of an all-right red 2-drop. Red did need some 2-drop love. Mm-hmm. The ability to gain +1/+1 is probably what I'm most excited about, quite honestly. I'm going to get some red mages. It's going to be good content. Somebody out there is going to give, say, my 1/4 creature, it's going to target it, right? Turn it into a coward, and then attack with a pair of 1 toughness creatures. And because that's a static ability, I'm going to remove the Kargan Intimidator with a removal spell, and then I'm going to block the other 1 toughness creature, even though I'm a coward, because the Intimidator is gone. And they are going to concede, uninstall MTG Arena, and download a different game.
Who's the coward now, baby?
Exactly.
Yeah. Here's the problem with this card. Just one of the number of problems with this card is that when are you really going to want to spend the mana on this card? Mono red decks don't spend mana on activating creature abilities. They spend mana playing hasty threats and frickin' getting in there. They spend mana leaving up shock mid-combat. They spend mana leaving up combat tricks mid-combat. So where are you going to find the mana to pump into this thing? And I assume that if you have the available mana to pump into this thing, you're already losing the game. So that's kind of my read on this card.
It's not a clean addition to the 2-drop spot for red. I don't think you just slam 4 of them.
Yeah.
It's not automatically great. Sometimes Rimrock Knight is significantly better.
Agreed.
So, this card is an option, but I'm not sold on it either.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting card. It has enough text that, I don't know, you have to kind of respect it, I suppose. All right. Seagate Restoration. I'm very interested to hear your take on this card, so go ahead and read this for us, CGB.
Seagate Restoration is 4 blue, 7 mana total. Sorcery, mythic rare. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, or be a lightning bolt land. Take 3 damage for it to be untapped. Add blue.
So I'm just going to give you my hot take on this card. My initial read was that this was one of the worst of this cycle, but I don't know. Are you higher on this than I am?
Not by much. I'm going to play it because it is in this cycle in the colors I play.
Yeah.
But I'm not playing it because I feel like I can really abuse it. I think the most interesting thing about it is the fact that it doesn't exile. So you can get it back and cast it again once you have a few more cards stocked up in your hand with something like the green regrowth. But we're basically, we're saying that we're not doing anything. You know what I mean? And I do kind of want to try it in Turbo Fog-ish deck, but that's like old school nonsense. I don't think this card is particularly good.
One of the reasons this card isn't very good is that the only reason in decks that play cards like this that you're going to want to spend 7 mana main phase to play this card is that you have nothing else to do. And if you have nothing else to do, it probably means that you don't have that many cards in your hand. And if that's the case, it means you're not going to get very much value out of this card. So the more cards you have in hand, the less incentivized you are to cast this, and so the less benefit you get from it. So that's my problem with it. It's kind of perverse incentive. If you have literally nothing to do, maybe you're flooding out, maybe you have 2 lands in hand, and then you just main phase this to try to find something else. It's not the end of the world. And being able to get that out of your tap land is, I would agree, pretty powerful. But I mean, dang, dude. And then, in the other case where you have to shock this in and take 3, that's going to feel pretty bad too, especially in these blue decks are not going to want to be taking random damage. So that's kind of why I'm low on this card.
Yeah, and the downside of having to shock for the untapped ability is probably more intense if you're playing blue, because blue decks can't usually miss a beat, and they telegraph things like that they have a counter spell when they shock in, especially if they pay 3 life for it on turn 3 or something like that. So it's still going to see play, but I'm not nearly as excited about it. And when I look at the options from the other colors, I'm very frustrated. So
I think they could have made this card better and it still wouldn't have been busted. But, let's all agree, blue, most powerful color in Magic, so they didn't want to push it too far.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, green's been giving it a run for its money, but in the broad sweep, it's still blue. So, there you go. Why don't you read this one for us, CGB? Morog, Fury of Akum.
Morog, Fury of Akum, 4 red legendary creature, Minotaur warrior, mythic. 6/6. Each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Wait, there's more. It's one of the best teaser lines of text ever, though, right?
You're like,
you start there and
happening?
you're like, huh? Okay. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control.
So what you're telling me, CGB, is that we could potentially trigger this more than once a turn?
Yes, you could. You could, in fact, put lands onto the battlefield to create multiple combat steps. Do keep in mind, damage does not clear. Your creatures have to survive the combat.
Yeah.
Also, I'm in before the comments on probably the YouTube is where this happens the most. You don't go infinite with Uro. The land has to enter the battlefield during your main phase. The land from Uro, the attack trigger enters in combat.
Yeah.
So that's not an endless combo till they die. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one of those classic probably win more cards. One of the things I like about this card, if you're trying to do the thing, is that you could actually win the game the turn you play Morog. So even though it itself doesn't have haste, the ability could still be very relevant for the purposes of winning the game. The problem is it's going to be hard to play this on curve and get value out of it. If you have some kind of onboard things that are helping you hit your land drops, then this could be pretty strong, but it also supposes that you actually have creatures in play when you play this. So I think in general it suffers from all of the problems that big dragon finishes suffered from. But, I mean, it's an objectively powerful card, and it's definitely the kind of card which says if I untap with it, I will win the game. So, I don't know. Like, is there any more to say about it than that?
Did we cover Ashaya? We did in our last show, right?
Yeah, Ashaya, yeah.
Okay. So this does say untap all creatures you control.
Ah, that's a combo.
So for every land that you get to play during your main phase, you'll have an additional combat phase, and in each spot you could tap those. You could tap all those creatures for mana and then untap them. If you can find a way to keep the lands coming, you might be able to do some nonsense. But it's very complicated because mana is going to clear at different phases, right? So you've got to find ways to use all that. It sounds complicated, but super interesting. And then we'll get to Nahiri's lithoforming and whether or not that's what you do with all that mana. And I don't know. The card is exciting in a million ways, and it's going to be a build around. And the fact that it's 6 mana for sorcery speed means it's probably not going to be a standard winner, but it's going to make for some sweet YouTube videos and content along the way. I expect this card to be one of the more viewed Twitch clips circulating during the release event.
Yeah, this is going to be like a Mirror March level of memeing out of this card. I think that this card gives you incentives to play things like the Selfless Savior. You just really want the damn thing to live.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you play this and you just have a Winota and 1 or 2 creatures that can survive the combat, like there's a lot that you can do. It's just about what deck is going to have the mana and the setup and make it pay. Maybe it's just enough on its own to get 2 Uro attacks. Maybe that is so far ahead, or Gargaroth attacks. Maybe you're so far ahead that nobody comes back from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're building around this, it's worthwhile putting cards in your deck where you're really hoping to just frickin' keep this thing around, because it really does win the game on its own. I mean, if this is the only creature under your control the turn you untap with it, you could still just win the game. Dang, you play a land. Boom.
Another card worth mentioning is Perforos.
Let's see. Oh, Perforos. Dang,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah, it's pretty deep, right?
That's
pretty
deep,
jank
but,
deep.
I mean,
haste.
Yeah.
And you only spend 3 mana to get this, and then you hit your land drop, and then you still have 3 mana to play something else, and you turn Perforos on. It's indestructible.
Yeah. And it is game ending, so could be worth playing crummy cards like that in your deck to enable.
You spent turn 5 doing nothing. You better win.
Yep. Yep. So anyway, yeah, the power is there. We'll put it that way. The power is there. Okay, another card which I am actually fairly excited about, which which you had mentioned or alluded to earlier here, is Philath World Sculptor. Read this for us.
4 red-green for a legendary elemental creature, 5/5. When World Sculptor enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 plant creature token for each basic land you control. Landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4 +1/+1 counters on target plant you control.
I mean, what a payoff, man. Baby, this thing is cool.
Throw back to Avenger of Zendikar. Have you played much with that card?
No, I haven't.
Baby, you're missing out. So my Avenger of Zendikar experience goes to Magic Duels 2014, where you could get a green deck that had Primeval Titan, Avenger of Zendikar, and Tooth and Nail, and you would often just make like 26 sixes. So this card is not that good, but it's got a lot of those things going for it. For one thing, I think there's going to be a lot of incentives to still have basics in our decks. Like a lot. I don't think that's going to be it's going to be a drawback, but not a huge drawback. I think most of the time when you trigger this, you have like 3, maybe 4 plants to work with, and putting counters on them becomes very powerful very quickly. This plus like a Fabled Passage is, what is that, 13 power? Potentially the turn you play it. And those 0/1 plants, they can block that big old 6/6 hexproof hasty guy.
Yeah, so this is what we're looking for on our 6-drop creatures. Of all, we want them to be able to win the game on their own, which this absolutely can. This is like, if you untap and play, if you get a single landfall trigger out of this, you've gotten paid. So not that hard to do. This card just makes a board on its own. Like you said, the absolute floor on this is you get no plants, but if you've built your deck correctly, that's basically not going to happen. Yeah, I just think like in a deck that you're actually building around Philath as a finisher, you're going to have plenty of things to do with those plant creature tokens. It's just easy to see scenarios in which you untap and win the game with this thing. And the fail state is that even if you don't untap with it, you still made X number of plant creature tokens, which your deck is built around exploiting anyway. So it's hard for me to imagine this not being very, very good in the deck that you would want to put it in. Now, whether it ends up being more powerful than whatever else is going on in the format, whether it ends up having the full support, is the only real question. But the base power level of the card is high.
Yeah, it does feel like this could be the Nissa, Omnath, where are we going kind of payoff that puts out enough power and toughness that the opponent has to do something or they're just going to be dead. And then, of course, you get it back with the regrowth effect that's also a land, and on we go,
Tasty. And this may be stepping into jank territory, but if you have any way to blink this card, whoa, baby. So yeah, another pretty sweet, exciting card. Here's another card that I think is actually pretty good. Cinderclasm. 1 and a red instant at uncommon with kicker single red. Cinderclasm deals 1 damage to each creature. If it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to each creature instead. So apart from the mana cost being different, this looks like a strictly better Flame Sweep to me. I suppose Flame Sweep got around killing your own flyers in some cases, so that was a better thing. But in general, Cinderclasm looks like a very good card to me.
It's a good answer to the World Sculptor and the...
Yes.
Yeah.
It sure is, man.
Take out those plants, man. They're about to get way too many counters on them.
Yeah. Again, like, as long as you actually have the double red to cast this, I think it's better than Flame Sweep. Being able to cast this for the front side and get value out of the 1 damage just seems like a big upgrade. So
takes out the Cobra.
Yeah, it kills the Cobra. This card does a lot, man. I mean, how playable it ends up being depends on the format, but it just seems like a sideboard role player, and I don't know, it just looks like a very good card to me.
Also looks nuts if the red decks of the format are playing like 1 mana 1/1, 2 mana 3/1.
Yes.
Which looks very possible right now.
Nasty. Yeah, you're gonna get paid on that 2 mana mode sometimes.
It's a party wrecker, dude.
Dude,
like,
total.
Where'd your party go?
Bro, where's my party?
Dude, this is the Popo. Cinderclasm is Popo. They break up every party.
Man, sometimes Cinderclasm is going to come down and kill 2 of your opponent's Brazen Borrowers, and they're going to feel real bad about that.
I already do.
Yeah, we're already pouring
I'm sad right now.
Gas. This card gets a total gas from me. CDB, why don't you take us into Brushfire Elemental?
Red-green elemental creature, 1/1, haste, can't be blocked by creatures with power of 2 or less. Landfall, Brushfire Elemental gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And I'm kind of excited about this because of the curve and potential landfall synergy that could happen. If you want to draw up a play pattern that's very, very scary, you can play turn 1 Hellhound. The 0/1 that gets +2/+2.
Mm-hmm.
You can play turn 2 this card, get in for 3. Turn 3, you can play, I believe it was Rolling Regrowth, and get 3 landfall triggers and attack the opponent for 13.
Nasty.
So that's the scenario that people are going to look at and say, is there an aggro deck from landfall? And when it comes to exactly that, yes, there is. And next turn, you're going to untap with 5 mana. Can you do something there to end the game? I bet you can come up with something. So I think Brushfire Elemental is worth a look for that reason alone. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. These landfall decks are going to be very swingy. I think if they exist, there's going to be games where they just totally demolish you, and then there's going to be games where they peter out real quick and have a bunch of dorks. So, but I do agree, it looks like Gruul Landfall is being set up to be a particular aggressive deck in the format. And cards like this are powerful enough. This card is good, man. If you get a landfall trigger at least once a turn, this card's very, very good.
It's also hard to block. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. We've seen that come up with the Questing Beast a lot more than I think. I mean, people read Questing Beast, they didn't know what to think. They're like, this card must be good. It's just a million miles of upside. But that unblockability has been more relevant than I think people even thought. And this has that, but on a cheaper body that can potentially hit even harder.
This card depends on whether the deck as a whole ends up being playable. Keep an eye on the deck. That's the thing. Keep an eye on the deck. If there is a deck, this card will be in it, 100%. Read this one for us, CGB.
Relic Robber is 2 in a red for a 2/2 Goblin Rogue at rare with haste. Whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, that player creates an 0/1 colorless Goblin Construct artifact creature token with, quote, this creature can't block, and at the beginning of your upkeep, this creature deals 1 damage to you. Have a gift. It's fine. It's like when your neighbor gives you a cat that's like all messed up. Like a very evil cat. And it doesn't, like, you're okay. You will live, but you're getting half the sleep you used to get. So it's kind of like taking 1 damage a turn. You're just going to die a lot sooner.
Yeah, and then it has a litter of kittens, and now you have a bunch of awful cats you need to deal with.
So what we're saying is this card needs to be spayed and neutered.
Gas. You know what this card is? This is a 3-mana Chandra Awakened Inferno. That's what this card is.
Oh, Lord. Well, at least they can't fetch it from their adventure sideboard to trigger that rant.
It from the sideboard. So, really hard to evaluate this card. It seems janky and kind of crappy, but those little dorks are going to be annoying over the course of a game. And if you get 2 hits off of this, you're going to feel pretty good about it. This card ranges from flagrantly unplayable to surprisingly decent in my mind, and I really haven't made up my mind about it. So help me out, CGB. What are we doing with this card?
The card is good when it can't be blocked, and I'm not willing to invest mana into that operation. You know what I mean? People are going to play Sabira, right, and use her ability to make this unblockable, and it's like, no, I'm not putting any extra mana into it. I want to pay 3 mana, hit the opponent, then gift them this little pinging artifact that they have to deal with, or they take more damage for the rest of the game. And when you do that, it's Legion Warboss, and when you can't hit the opponent, it's trash. So it's sideboard, in my opinion, at best. The meta would have to be really weird to where there's just nothing on battlefields whatsoever to make this good. And I'm not into it from a competitive sense, but maybe sideboard against control. That's the best I can do.
So if you get one hit in with it, do you feel like you got paid?
It depends how long the artifact also sticks around, right? I mean, what can they do something with it? Most decks can't, but I mean, if you say that you main this and you've decided this is your new jam, and your opponent casts Village Rites, you're going to feel like a clown.
Yeah, Village Rites gets owned. Yeah, any kind of sack deck is going to laugh at this card. Can I interest you in curving this into Torbran?
For what reason? It's an artifact creature token, and you don't control
Oh, so it's not a red creature.
Yeah, it doesn't get a Torbran boosties.
So no, we can't interest anyone in that combo. Yeah, I agree this card is like a role player. Maybe it doesn't see any play. I think it has the potential to be... I don't think it's Legion Warboss, but it has the potential to play a similar role. Some decks are going to have a really hard time dealing with those tokens. So, yeah. I'm interested.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I think it's
very
sweet.
situational.
Flavorful.
Very situational.
Ooh, okay. This one, if there is a playable white aggressive deck in Standard, it will definitely be playing this card. Luminarch Aspirant. 1 and a red, creature human cleric, add rare, 1/1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Do you agree with me that this is going to be the backbone of white aggressive decks in Standard?
I have to back it up and say that you said it was 1 and a red, and I'm not letting you take this from white, man. They've lost too much.
My bad.
They've lost too much.
My bad. It is a white card.
Obviously. Yeah, it was just a misspoke. I was just really hoping to dagger you there, but you even said twice it was white, and now I feel bad. But it's okay. Guys, it's a lot of cards. It's a lot of reading.
We've done a lot of reading today.
But this card is sweet. On its own, if you have nothing else going, you have a 2-mana 2/2 the turn it enters the battlefield, and if the opponent doesn't shock or bone crush it, then it can on its own be a 2-mana 3/3, which is way above rate for white for some reason. So the counters, though, are far from irrelevant. If you want to play with Conclave Mentor in that deck, this is another trigger every single beginning of combat, which is exciting for free. If you want to play with Speaker of the Heavens, I think this is one of my favorite interactions. Like, those two scale so fast.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both clerics. So Cleric Tribal, let's go, right? I believe Speaker is a cleric. I'm pretty sure it was.
That's a good question.
I mean, what else would it be?
Good. That's a good point. Yeah.
It would be the worst flavor ever.
What should be a vampire rogue?
Oh my gosh. So I played Bassariket with Speaker a lot in 2021, and that was just putting a counter on it. The amount of life you gained very quickly was a big deal. Also, Bassari's Lieutenant works with +1/+1 counters. This pushes them around. The card has synergy with a lot of pieces that haven't found a home in white yet, and I think will, mostly because of this card. The frustrating thing about this card, quite honestly, is that it is a cleric, and all the other cards that you want to play before and after it are clerics, which makes it very awkward in parties.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a bit too many clerics for it to be a party card.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
One of the issues is that I don't know that you want to play this in the cleric stack either.
Really?
Oh, well, here's my question, right? This is only just because when I look at the cleric payoffs, they seem to be more like sack value payoffs and not aggro payoffs. So that's why I say that.
Well, there's a huge difference between those sack like value-y payoffs if the opponent has to try to do something about it, right? If you want your Archfiend's Vessel in the graveyard without drawing a Village Rites, sometimes the opponent will just let it sit there all game and attack for 1 or do nothing while they build up their strategy. And by the time you can get it in your graveyard, they can deal with a 5/5, right? But this card just says, okay, you're going to have to do something about this little guy because he is going to beat you to death. He's going to keep attacking for more and more. So they can either kill the Aspirant or they can kill the Vessel. You get back the Aspirant, now they got to do it again. Like, I think that it actually makes a bunch of those little sack value cards matter in ways that they otherwise wouldn't.
Okay. No, that's totally fair. Being able to put the counter any way you want it, is such big game, right? Because it just scales well with the game. If whichever creature you get the most value out of growing, you slap it on there. One of the nice things about this card, if you suspect that your opponent is going to be doing bone crushy things, you could just start putting the counters elsewhere, and then you get paid even if your opponent kills this. So overall, I think this card's very, very strong, and it's going to be one of those cards where like sometimes you resolve this on turn 2 on the play, and your opponent looks at their hand and they're like, I'm just going to lose to this card.
It's the best white 2-drop in a minute. I think we found Seasoned Hollowblade. It was a lot harder to give up the cards, and that card didn't really pay off. But this card's going to pay you.
Yeah, and the two of them are going to go together quite well. I mean, imagine this pumping the Hollowblade. That sounds pretty gas to me. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the backbone of white aggressive decks if they see play in the format. This card, some controversy around this one. So, CGB, read for us Magmatic Channeler.
1 and a red for a human wizard at rare. As long as there are 4 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Chandler gets +3/+1. Tap to discard a card. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, then choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. It's a 1/3 power toughness. What's the controversy?
Just whether you play this card.
What kind of deck? Let's start with a deck type.
So it has to go in a spells deck.
Does it?
Yeah. You have to have spells.
In the graveyard?
Yep.
For the bonus?
Yep.
So we're saying that without that, it's probably not worth it, right? Because I think a lot of people are looking at discard a card, exile top 2, you may play one of them, and they're thinking that is insanely good.
Nah, dude, you're not going to play this in your red deck or your Gruul aggressive deck. Get out of here.
Yeah, I have heard people talk about mono red, that this is your new 2-drop, and I agree.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. If we're talking about mono red burn in historic, oh baby, this could definitely be a consideration. Because that's a deck which is basically half creatures and half burn spells, and if your 2-drop ends up fishing for more burn spells and being a 4/4 finisher late in the game, then heck yeah. Don't know whether it's good enough for that archetype, but that's kind of a cool consideration if we're talking about not standard. As far as standard goes, just having a hard time.
Okay, so where are you playing it, and how good is it? Like, is this a must-get?
I mean,
is this a true upgrade?
It looks like a blue-red wizard spells kind of a card. And okay, let's acknowledge the power level is there. So a 4/4 for 2 mana is very good. A card which can, in theory, draw you more cards off the top of your deck to cast is very good. The problem is that it requires some enabling, so that's the first thing, and having to discard a card to get the effect off the channeler is pretty brutal. So I'm not immediately saying it's bad. This is another one of those cards where I'm going to need to see it before I believe it.
I would also throw in that tapping it is kind of brutal.
Yeah,
you're not going to be blocking with it if you're using it on your turn. And if you're using it on the opponent's turn, it's definitely iffy. Like, nothing is going to be more brutal than discarding a card, exiling 2 cards, and playing neither. Like, that's pretty unacceptable. And so the thing that I've said about this card on Twitch is that I think it's an elaborate trap. It's a cool-looking trap, but I think it's an elaborate trap because in the deck where it seems to make a ton of sense, like a proactive Izzet Spells deck, where you play it for 2 mana, maybe you use the ability 1 or 2 times, and then 2 turns later you're attacking with a 4/4 that you got for 2 that gained you a little bit of selection and helped you fill your graveyard. In that deck, I think you would have been paid better to be more aggressive. If you had just played a more aggressive Riddle form, Sprite Dragon, any of these effects, set up a Stormwing entity, like if that's where you put your mana, I think you're better off than you are with Magnetic Chandler. And I think that this card's chance depends on the discard a card text. If there's like some advantageous discard that we can make and set up some kind of a cool, I want to say reanimation, but I'm hoping it's something a little like that already has kind of a janky affiliation. But if there's some way to set up a great graveyard with this, like how's this if it's your 2-drop in like a Teamer Uro deck, right? So it fills the graveyard a bit and helps you hit your land drops and play your Uros, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst idea. The team of colors are powerful. You get to play interesting cards like Shark Typhoon and counter spells, although we haven't seen very many good counter spells. It's not the worst idea, but...
Yeah, I want something better. I really do.
Yeah. There's nothing like objectively bad on this card. It's just really hard to figure out where it goes. That's the issue, because we're not playing Merfolk Secret Keeper just to enable the dang thing. People are going to try to curve this into Riel and then go off, but that still sounds too janky for my tastes. All right. Talk about another weird card, man. Leyline Tyrant. Read Leyline Tyrant for us, CGB.
2 red for a dragon, mythic, flying, 4/4. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. When Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay an amount of red. Any amount of red. When you do, it deals that much damage to any target.
Okay, so here's my first question. You still lose the mana at the end of your turn, right?
No.
Okay, so you just keep it for all time.
It would be the ultimate troll if they were like, oh, but turns are different from phases. You know what I mean? Okay,
that was my main question with this, because if you just get to keep the mana forever, then that's a start. It's a start with this card. I'm not saying that I'm a buyer on it, but it's a start.
To my knowledge, while this is in play, the mana pool does not empty.
And that's red mana, though, only.
Red mana only, correct.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, there will be 50 comments on YouTube, and you will know before I do.
Okay, there we go. So, is this still worse than Terror of the Peaks?
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have very different functions.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big problem with this card is that it's red.
Yeah.
Like, you said it before, red doesn't keep mana lying around. Red is about efficiently spending mana until the opponent's head explodes.
Yeah. It's interesting. It seems like they're trying to give us a lot of combo options for red. If you look down the list of rares and mythics in this set, you've just got random janky combo enabler after random janky combo enabler. This is a combo payoff.
Iron Crag Feet, here we go.
Yeah, people are going to try it, man. They're sure going to try it. And, I mean, we can both agree that the ceiling on this card is immensely high. I mean, the ability to generate a metric crap ton of red mana from this card is not to be underestimated. However, the ease of it to die as a 4/4 that you didn't get any value out of is also not to be underestimated. So this is going to be a role player in a very specific deck if it ends up seeing play at all. Looks like a fun build around, but my initial thing is to slot this into some C or D tier level of jank.
Yes. I've been fooled too many times over the years by 4 mana mythic 4/4 flying dragon with some kind of a flashy ability.
Yeah.
I can't get excited about this anymore.
Yeah. It's a weirdo, man. This is like the guy who shows up late to the party with a bunch of beer that no one wants to drink.
Looks just like him, too, if you look at this art.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on with this? What is this dragon?
This kind of looks more like a sea monster than a dragon, to be honest.
Yeah. Sea beer monster.
Get out of here, you weirdo. All right, I'm very interested to hear you read this next card, CGB. Take us into it.
Juwari Disruption is 1 in a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Or have a tapped blue source. You want my take?
Censor has been reprinted in Standard.
This is not as good as Censor.
It is not as good as Censor.
Because the card you draw is complete trash.
Not remotely closely as good as Censor.
But I actually think it's okay. Here's the thing. Late in the game, when this card is no longer good and you draw it, getting a tap land is not good either. So this card's actual power level is non-existent. But the mind game power is incredible. Because what I'm going to do with this card is play it on turn 1. as a land.
So you're going to have your singleton copy, and you're going to slam it turn 1 tapped, and then for the rest of the game, your opponent's going to play off curve.
if you get an opponent who, is trying to out big brain you, and they see you slam this on turn 1, and then you pass with 2 mana open the next turn, they're going to be like, well, I don't want to run my card into that, so I'll wait 1 more turn, because the threat of Censor was always better than Censor itself, and it's the same with this card. So is that actually a good enough reason to play this card? Probably not. This is probably an absolute 0, but I'm just saying. Get the mind games going, man. You're not a blue mage if you don't mind game a little.
My initial take is that the average player would win more games by forgetting this card was ever printed on either side of the battlefield. Don't play around it and don't put it in your decks. But, you're going to get got by it. It's going to be really annoying. And who knows, maybe it ends up being the counterspell we didn't want, but the counterspell we need. Real quick, Mind Drain, 2 and a black sorcery. Target opponent discards 2 cards, mills a card, and loses 1 life. You gain 1 life. Any shell in which we're cool playing this card?
This is the new official card of the podcast because of the flavor text. Would you like to read it?
Oh, okay. The meal was exquisite. The conversation less so. Hey! I feel baited. CGB's entrapped, and I'm baited.
No, don't play this card. Come on. You can get 3 cards in a graveyard, but
that's the reason I'm at all thinking about it.
It's the best mind rot ever, and it's still
not playable.
It's still just not up to standard. I don't think so. I mean, there's a world, but I don't get it, and I think that I'm better off not worrying about it and playing cards that do stuff, that get the job done, because this still has the biggest mind rot problem. Terrible top deck in the late game.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just frankly still not really good enough on its face. So, but anyway, I wanted to cover it because I think people will consider running it in their rogues deck or their basically any deck running the Drown in the Lock. Right? People are going to be looking at this card, and I think I would agree with you. Just pass it over. Pretend it doesn't exist. All right, now we're on to our next mythic sorcery land. This one's kind of interesting, so read this for us, CGB.
Turntimber Symbiosis is 4 green sorcery. It's one of the ones with a pay 3 life for this to be untapped green source on the back. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. If that card has converted mana cost 3 or less, it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. What do you think, Green Mage?
Card's not amazing, but I would play this all day in my green aggressive deck. A of all, you're aiming to be the deck that doesn't care so much about life total, so a deck that you're fairly willing to pay the cost in. B of all, flooding out is real bad in these decks. So in the situations where this finds a Yorvo or a Questing Beast off the top, you're going to feel pretty happy about it. In the situations it finds one of your dorky 1 or 2 drops, you're going to feel pretty happy about it. This is kind of flood protection in your aggressive green deck, and like I said, that deck wants untapped lands and doesn't care that much about the life loss. So consider this, for me, a slam dunk 4 of in any aggro mono green deck. What I'm curious about is in the other decks. Like, for example, do you play this in your Omnath deck? I don't know. Kind of interesting.
That's a good question, actually. I think so. I think it's among the best of this style. And I think that is alone a good enough reason to put it in a deck that has a creature that hits if you have enough of them. I think the Gruul Landfall deck is going to play this, no question. Because they've got that haste critter to hit too. Like when you hit a haste creature with this, you're doing it, You're adding a ton of extra pressure to the board in a spot that normally would be a top decked land. It like that's what you want. Unlike most of them, which kind of don't play with a lot of the strategies of modern Magic decks, we've talked down a lot of the other mythics in this cycle because of that. This one plays with the strategy you want. Threats on the board, pressure, constantly just retaking the battlefield with the best thing going on and forcing the opponent not only to match it, but to create their own. Like, that's what Magic has been. And this card is that. And big surprise, the green one is good.
The green one is playable. I agree.
It can even hit a 0/0. Like, that would normally be a whiff, right?
No, you're right. Stone Coil comes in as a 3/3. Oh, baby.
Yeah, that's not normal. So, great. Awesome. 4 of them. Green decks. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, I agree. Any green deck that cares about creatures should just be running probably 4 of these, but definitely some number of these. Yeah, I mean, okay, the absolute fail state is that you spent 7 mana and you whiffed, but how likely is that to happen? I mean, it's going to happen to me, but how likely is it going to happen to anyone else?
The 6/6 hexproof haste is a 9/9 hexproof haste.
Damn, now we're really doing it.
Just picture like a Naya deck, and on turn 7 you play this and you grab Winota, and now you attack.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hard to see the downside in any deck that would at all consider running this. Okay, this card is interesting to me. Concerted Defense. 1 blue mana for an instant at uncommon. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1, plus an additional 1 mana for each creature in your party. So the floor on this card is a Spell Pierce in which your opponent has to pay 1 mana. I don't know if that card is playable, but Spell Pierce is definitely a playable card, and I think that the decks that would consider running this are like these roguey, tempo-y decks. And I don't know, man, this card could be a blowout, especially if you're trying to play this protect your rogues just long enough to get them dead. Maybe like protect your Zareth San kind of a card. Also, in some random spots, your opponent taps out for their, they spend 5 mana to kick their Jace or something, and you just freaking get them for 1 mana. So, do you agree with me that this card is at least worth considering playing?
It's worth considering.
Yeah.
Target non-creature spell has been... Well, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, and we've got to get a feel on the format for how hard we get punished if the opponent, we play this and the opponent, goes off with Omnath, then it's not looking that good. Zarasan's looking sad. But I do like it protecting the rogue deck. I think that as a spell pierce, as long as you have a rogue on the field, it's definitely worth considering. So, yeah, I like this card.
Do you think the stock in this card goes up when everyone's main decking 4 to 8 to 12 7 mana sorcery lands in their deck?
Maybe. It depends on how often we're actually reaching that point of the game and how often it's broken by these plays.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It depends on what the end games of the format actually look like. I really don't care very much if the opponent makes 2 giant 4/4 angels if my rogues are somehow unblockable anyway and just smash right through. But if that is indeed a brick wall for my team, then yes, I would love for them to spend 7 mana and get wrecked.
This could be a very difficult card to play around, especially if you have a lot of flash threats, which these rogue decks are going to be playing. Having 4 Brazen Borrowers in your deck makes this a much better card. So this could be a card that is very good when enabled by other cards in your deck, which are already very good and playable. And so when I look to a situational card like that, that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm coming in hot on this one. I think that the tempo decks that play any number of rogues should be running this in the 75. Whether it's just a main deck, I don't know, but should be running in the 75.
Agreed.
Another DFC. Read for us Malakir Rebirth, CGB.
1 black, instant, uncommon, choose target creature. You lose 2 life until end of turn. That creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And it is a tap and a black for a black land on the flip side.
This one looks like one of the more underwhelming ones to me.
It's interesting. It doesn't say put it into play under your control, it's owner's control, and I can't stop trying to think about how to steal the opponent's creature with it. Like when would I ever target the opponent's creature with this card? That's what I can't get off my mind. On the other hand, on turn 1, you can play Vessel, and on turn 2, you can play this in Village Rites and have a 5/5.
Okay, that's a start.
And if you don't have that draw, you have a tap land. So somebody might try this. I could see those sacrificey, sneaky decks giving this a shot. And it is an instant, so you can play it on your creatures, protect them from removal. That works. So this card isn't terrible. It just has a very specific job. It really wants to work with death and ETB triggers, and it really wants to, like, you probably want ways to kill your own things because this will rot in your hand otherwise. But it's one of those conditional cards that I think is definitely benefited by being a DFC.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like this Cleric's deck is going to end up being a very heavily sacrifice-based deck. So this could be a role player. I mean, did they have to lose 2 life on it? I feel like that was unnecessary.
Your Clerics, just get it back, bro.
I guess
Suck
so.
it up.
I guess so.
They could lose 5 life on it. Who cares? We're just going to gain it all back. We're Clerics, baby.
All right, talk about an interesting card that has to do with the amount of life you have. Scourge of the Skyclaves. 1 and a black creature demon at Mythic with kicker 4 and a black. When you cast this spell, if it was kicked, each player loses half their life rounded up. Scourge of the Skyclave's power and toughness are each equal to 20, minus the highest life total among players. So we have another Death's Shadow style of card here. This is such a weird frickin' card, CGB. What are we doing with this?
Well, if you're going to kick it for 7 and then have a 10/10, and it doesn't even fly, it's a demon, but it doesn't fly, all right? Then I think that you're just playing a different game. The Commander players are going to be very vocal about this in Commander multiplayer games. Good job. You are vocal. This is MTG Arena Craft. So they didn't put Shocklands are rotated. A lot of what you do with Death Shadow is try to lose your own life, but you also have to mitigate your opponent's life total because it feeds off the person with the highest life total.
That's one of the main problems. If it's localized to one player, you can just focus on lowering that player's life total, but you don't have that with this card.
So you have to do both, and you don't have Shocklands. So what you have to do is be aggressive and hit the opponent pretty hard, and you probably have to play a lot of the pay 3 life lands and bolt yourself to make this card come alive. And if I understand this right, its power and toughness are equal to 20 minus. So as soon as both players are at 19, you can play this as like a 1/1?
Yeah.
Okay, so at least you don't have to get down to like 7 life before you play this and it just dies or something.
Yeah.
You want to get this on the field and you want to pressure both players. And I think that's asking too much. I think the card is going to be a dud, but it's at least going to be a puzzle of a dud that we have to figure out. So it's interesting. It makes me want to play it with the Shock lands and the Lightning Bolt lands and Thoughtseize in Historic very much. But in Standard, I'm curious to see where it lands. I'm not really sure. But keep in mind, Malachor Rebirth, baby. Lose 2 life. And when they kill this, it comes back.
There you go. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So I think Death Shadow also didn't really see play in Standard when it was released, but it turned into one of the more powerful things to do in Modern. So I agree with you. Like, the further back you look, the more possibility we have with a card like this. I wouldn't count it out. I mean, a 2-mana card that, has the potential to A of all just be a massive creature, and B of all does actually have the potential to make your opponent lose half their life, if that's your goal. Seems pretty strong. I don't know. This goes into a very particular shell, and I don't particularly think we're going to have the pieces in Standard. That's my guess. Also, there are just games when your opponent will be at 18 and you'll resolve this, and they play an Oro and it just dies. So watch out for that. Oro is going to be a stone cold killer against this card.
Oh, don't. No, you're spoiling the fun. You're spoiling the fun.
We were having so much fun before Oro showed up. Just crapping on the party, man. Thanks for listening to part 5, and keep an eye out for part 6, which will be releasing very soon this week.